Hi everyone, it's Monique here with MD Consulting. I wanted to talk to you today about a question that I keep getting. I've had emails on this and it has also been coming up in my coaching sessions with clients. Now, as you know, I work with executives and provide them with executive coaching. A question I've been getting a lot of lately has to do with my clients needing to talk with some of their direct reports about something negative. They need to deliver some type of constructive criticism or some information that is not positive. And they are having trouble understanding how to start the conversation, how to have the conversation. They may even get very nervous before they walk into the meeting. And they get so nervous that sometimes their heart starts beating really fast. They feel their throat maybe closing up a little bit because they're not breathing correctly, because they're so nervous about how to deliver this information. And many times they have reason to be nervous because the direct report may be very defensive, may be angry. The conversation may start out well, but may lead to the direct report being angry. So they really want to frame the conversation for the best possible outcome. And they want it to be collaborative. They want to get their point across in a way that diffuses the defensiveness that the other person may have. So the question is, how do you even do this? How do you have a conversation like this? And there is a communication technique that I want to talk to you about today real quick. I won't keep you for long. This is just a quick tip. But it's called the use of open-ended questions. Now, you may have heard of this. You may even have used it. But for those of you that aren't familiar with it, let me give you a little bit of a distinction. A closed-ended question is a question that you ask that can only be answered with a yes or a no. And that could be something like, did you have a good day today? That would be answered with a yes or a no. An open-ended question cannot be answered with a yes or no, and it prompts the person to respond in a way where they have to give more information, they have to contribute more, they have to talk more, which puts you in a place of listening. And by listening, I mean active listening. Listening with empathy and using body language to communicate as you're listening. And the way this would work, typically an open-ended question, and they can be phrased a number of different ways, but typically they would start with how, when, who. You can start the question with why, but sometimes that causes the other person to be a little defensive, because if you ask somebody why, you're asking them to justify their actions. Now, there are times when a question like that is perfectly appropriate, but not in the context where I'm talking to you about this topic today. Typically, we wouldn't start a conflict conversation with an open-ended question that asks why. So you want to stick to how, when, what, things like that. And it could even be phrased a little bit differently. It's not quite in the form of a question, but an example, if we use the question about how was your day, and that was a yes or no answer, you could even say something like, tell me how your day went today. So there's the how is in there. And that doesn't start with the word how, but it ends up being an open-ended question. Tell me what you did today during the day. And that prompts the person to ask and talk, and maybe they have a question for you, so they're asking you, and it's a collaborative two-way conversation. And as you are using active listening skills while you're listening to them, it may prompt you to ask another open-ended question. And it may not be phrased exactly like a question, but it might be something like, oh, well, tell me what you mean by that. Or can you explain more about that? It's still an open-ended question. The point is, it's not a closed-ended question. They're not answering with a yes or a no. It's prompting them to expand more on the conversation. So by doing this, you are learning as you're talking to them and as they are speaking to you. And the way that this could apply to a work situation, if you had to deliver some negative information about someone's productivity, and you bring them into your office, and instead of starting out by listing all the ways they're not productive and all the ways that they messed up, you might start out by saying, how are you doing on your goals? Or tell me how you think you're doing with your production or with your productivity. So it's, you know, the how is in there. Or you could say, tell me what you think about how things have been going. The point is that you don't want to start out by saying, do you think you're doing well? That is a yes or no question, and they might automatically get defensive when they hear that. So you want to ask those types of questions in these types of situations because it tends to diffuse any defensiveness. It turns the conversation into more of a collaborative conversation where it's a two-way street. You're talking back and forth. You may even end up learning something that you didn't know, and then you could ask something like, oh, I didn't know that that was happening for you. Tell me more about that. Now, it doesn't excuse the fact that possibly they're not producing and there still has to be maybe disciplinary action. But during the point A and point B, when you start the conversation and then when you have to deliver the consequence, during that gap, you're learning, and you may learn something that you didn't know, and it may change the outcome. It might change the consequences if you learn something that you didn't already know. So it's very important to have those types of conversations and not really immediately jump to the consequence, but give the person a chance to talk and explain or give you some more context around the situation. And then you can judge for yourself. You can gauge if this still requires the same consequences or different consequences, maybe no consequences, or maybe there's a way that you can brainstorm with them to figure out the consequences or to figure out a way you can support them better. For example, there may still be consequences, but maybe you find that they didn't feel they were getting enough support. And maybe you make some changes on your end where you could provide some additional support to them, even though you have to deliver the consequences. So that's a quick tip about open-ended questions. I hope that it helps. And I will be back later in the month with some more tips as I get more questions. Have a great day. Bye-bye.